Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here for our 11 o'clock session. I'm Thomas Hare, the Chief Content Officer of the PDMI. We're really excited to have you here for today's Women's Leadership Council session. Should be a really interesting follow-up to our preceding media outlet roundtable. So, as always, we thank all of our sponsors for their support of PDMI East, but we particularly in here thank our education sponsor, Bluewater, for their support. This is, I believe, the third show in a row that Bluewater has sponsored our education, so we appreciate that very much. They've got a brief video to play for you, and here it is.
At Tommy John, a lot goes into our underwear before you do.
But now I've found my bubbly side with SodaStream.
Philips air fryer is the original and the very best.
So thank you again to Bluewater for their support of PDMI East. As noted, the Women's Leadership Council is bringing you continuity, opening the funnel for consumer engagement. We had a great panel led, of course, by Fern, the CEO of THOR Associates and also the chair of our Women's Leadership Council, the kind of creator of our Women's Leadership Council, which now has more than 75 members. Wonderful group. Very active. If you are a woman who works for a PDMI member company and you're not involved, you should get involved. Really tremendous group, so we thank you, Fern, for that. Also on stage today, we have Sarah Andreadakis, EVP of Media and Client Services for Bluewater. Welcome. Ryan Stroble, the owner of RSM. We also have Linda Goldstein, the Vice Chair of the Women's Leadership Council and a partner at BakerHostetler. And last, of course, but not least, Racine Levy of caredotcom, where she is the Senior Director of Performance and Brand Media. Welcome, Racine. And with that, I will throw it to you, Fern, and let you take it from here.
Perfect. So thank you all for showing up. We appreciate it. We have another day and a half of excitement, and today's panel is going to be fantastic. We're going to talk about continuity, everything from CRM to media to marketing, and then obviously compliancy, which we know is so important. So one of the key things is transparency. It's so important to touch and touch and touch. Let me say it again one more time. Touch and educate your consumer. The more you touch, the more you have longevity. The more longevity you have, obviously, the more ROI you have. So very, very key to everything we're going to talk about today. Let's jump in, and next on the slide. So Ryan, let's talk a little about what are the key pitfalls marketers need to be aware of when they're structuring and promoting their continuity?
Yeah, I think can I get a quick pulse of the room? Are there any brands, e-commerce, who's running continuity programs right now? Okay, perfect. I'd say the biggest pitfall that you could probably face if you're running continuity is just your churn rate. And the types of customers that you're getting in, are they aware of the subscription or the continuity programs that they're on? And just trying to educate them as much as possible and providing them as much value as you can to let them know what the benefit of being on your subscription is. So, for example, if you're running an e-commerce program, I'll bring up like a hair care product, for instance. If you're giving out a monthly restock of the product that they initially bought, are they aware of that restocked, or is it just showing up every month at their door and they're unaware of the subscription that they're on? So just providing your customers a really good experience so that you can keep them on your subscription, because at the end of the day, your lifetime value is probably what's most important, especially when it comes down to what your cost per acquisition to acquire these customers is. So most brands, what they're focused on is that initial acquisition. They're trying to get customers as fast as possible, and then they kind of forget about them along the way. So making sure that you're communicating with them through email, through SMS, phone calls.
That's why touching is so important. It's touch, and touching. You know that.
Yeah,
the more
exactly.
transparent you are, the more you're going to have loyalty and the more robust your ROI.
The longer they stay on,
Right.
you can
You got to be
find
careful
out.
saying that in 2025, Fern.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. Trust and transparency is key. I think as marketers, as brands, we kind of are like, okay, what's the response rate? What's the ROI? What's the CAC look like? And we're not like, hey, we need to actually like build trust and transparency with this community that we're trying to engage with our brand or with our product. So at Care and Angie, we have a very similar, offering different kind of services, but we provide a platform to connect parents to nannies or to senior care, if you're a senior to senior care, housekeeping, pet care. So you're really inviting a stranger into your home. So before that transaction, you need to build that trust with your community and your consumer to make sure when they're ready to transact, like you were saying, they feel that they can with your brand, and continuing that along the funnel, if that's through TV or CTV to drive awareness and then acquisition in the end, and then driving it home with lower funnel metrics. I think that's really important. I think what happens is when we're reporting numbers every day, we kind of lose sight of that. It's like, oh no, we didn't hit our forecast. It's like, okay, it's been day one, it's April 3rd. Like, our forecast just started. Like, what does that mean for long term? And I think that's really us as marketers, as advisors to these C-suites and to brands to really educate them on that. And like that trust factor is really important in the continuity.
Absolutely. And if I could just add one thing, Fern, the transparency should actually start before the consumer is even in the funnel. From an FTC standpoint, their view is that once you've got the consumer in the funnel, they're maybe emotionally connected to the purchase. And so increasingly, we're seeing them want to see at least some reference to the continuity in whatever, the initial touch point is, whether, it's TV or it's, the beginning of the website. So, for example, if you were offering a continuity program and you said, 1 month for just $6.99, that's true, but you didn't tell them, by the way, it's going to continue
$50
on.
every month.
That's going to be an issue.
So, okay, that's really important. You're talking about early funnel, making sure you're touching them. So, Sarah, what are the most common challenges brands face when launching continuity programs?
Well, like Ryan said, I would agree with that. That's a big challenge, is how are you going to keep nurturing that client and that relationship that you bring in? But generally what I find is a problem that we face on day one is wanting to understand what media they should be optimizing based off of day one. And it's not day one results that we really should be optimizing off of. It's more like your day 90 results. So how do we measure what the front end should look like when really we should be evaluating the lifetime value and what is that continuity value of that customer? And so managing that dynamic and where do we shift our media dollars, whether it's from a channel standpoint or all the way down to a particular station standpoint, setting yourself up for success in the beginning of how are we going to measure this? How are we going to identify that customer, be able to track them all the way through that life cycle and match it back to what's driving the transaction in the first place has to be key to the setup process. And wherever any of us are in that stage, we can get that started if we haven't already put that in place, but it is a critical step to the process.
Yeah, it's very important to like kind of blend. I think brand performance is like the trendy sexy buzzword, but it really is important to blend your traditional DR tactics with your more branded and like driving consideration and awareness throughout the campaign. And to your point, 90 days, you're not going to see results. I think people get really nervous when they're testing and like after a week, it's not performing in terms of your actual metrics, but you have to give it time, like when you're testing.
And we're going to talk about that a little to see, when does it stop? When, in the beginning it's a lost leader, how far out do you have to go? And again, obviously it's, your cost per order, your cost per lead, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So Ryan, I know you do a lot of e-commerce. So talk to us a little about creativity. How important is creative in the e-commerce world? And Sarah, you'll talk about it a little in the linear world, but how important is creativity in, getting out there and, obviously.
Oh, massive. It's massive. I think as marketers, you're always be willing to test new angles, new copy. I think a biggest piece, and when we talk about challenges for brands, challenges for any kind of company running subscription, I think going back to the point that I said, we focus so much energy acquiring the customer, we forget to nurture them along the way. And I think you get a lot of key insights from your customers if you're just nurturing them. If you're sending out a message or an email asking them how their experience was, getting a review on the product, that can help you better or come up with better marketing angles and creative that's going to help, maintain that source of revenue. So I think creative is a huge piece behind, this whole funnel.
I gotta agree with that. Like the conversation with the customer begins with the creative.
Yeah.
Okay, that is your first touch point, but it's not the only and the last touch point. So when we start at the beginning of thinking about the creative, not just from a TV commercial, or if we're going to think about it from a digital touch point, but how many places and times are we going to touch the consumer, making sure that that message is integrated all throughout all those touch points and the website, that we're supporting it with, I know it's not sometimes a very popular word here, but like even the organic content that we're going to put out allows us to start to create a relationship with the customer and for them to start to feel some loyalty. And that is really what it comes down to with continuity, is you need to begin some loyalty with your customers. It's funny how loyalty works with that. I was reading this thing the other day about surprising and delighting your customers. One of my kids is a huge Chick-fil-A fan. Like the amount of times this kid eats at Chick-fil-A is a little bit ridiculous. And of course he gets all the points, and if he's picking up for the family, he wants it to be on his thing. And the other day, we got this amazing package in the mail. It was a surprise and delight from Chick-fil-A, and it was a hat. My son's not really gonna wear this hat. It actually sits on his shelf. Of how cool is that, that Chick-fil-A sent him a hat.
Sent me the hat.
And the packaging, the messaging was on brand with everything else that they do, and really carried forward that characteristic, that personality of the brand, and now he feels part of it and feels more wanting to.
Well, it's he's connected. He's
is.
connected. It's like,
It is.
and it makes him want to go back for more.
Absolutely.
And
When we think about the creative, like that messaging of all the places we're going to touch our customers, and we need to touch them all throughout, throw in the surprise and delights. But also, Linda, I would think that that's also where we need to make sure that we do a little CYA.
Yeah, so I want to say something that might be jaw-dropping, but I don't mean it to be, just to create some awareness, which is, you talked a lot about testing, and the FTC is very aware of A/B testing, and in fact, they brought an action against Credit Karma, and ultimately, the complaint was based on their A/B testing of which words made the consumer more likely to feel like they were pre-approved for credit. And so I would just say be careful with the A/B testing. I mean, if you're testing purely creative elements, should it be red, should it be blue, those kinds of things, you really don't need to worry about it. But if it's specific words where you're maybe trying to communicate something more, then you can really support, or especially if you're testing disclosures like the size and what's that going to do to the conversion rates, I would just be careful. And if you do have lawyers in-house, put their names on the testing to try to get some kind of a privilege, especially if you're testing something really sensitive from a legal standpoint.
Love it. Racine, how can brands position a continuity or subscription offer in a way that's attractive and low risk to first-time buyers?
Yeah, I think it's like everything we're touching upon, just really building that trust. Like, for example, you don't think of TV and CTV as, a direct response performance. You think of more like digital channels like Ryan's Housing, but that truly is building awareness and trust with your consumer and then having them transact. So at Angie, we really built out the TV and CTV budgets and made sure that when we rebranded, that consumers still felt trusted with us. We were a brand since like 1992. Angie Hicks started it, and we dropped the list after a really great year of a high demand during COVID. And we kind of forgot that we built this business because of Angie, and that list was key to bringing customers and having trust on the website. So we forgot in our creative to say like, hey, we dropped the list. And we saw, unfortunately, because of that, we saw demand go down. Awareness went down 20% in that year. And then when we brought that back to the creative and retested, that's when we saw our metrics go up in terms of brand health, but also in terms of conversion, because people felt more comfortable. It's like almost introducing a new brand, or it's like the elephant in the room. And everyone's wondering why. It's like, hey, you dropped the list. Yeah, maybe the list isn't so like millennial and Gen Z, and like it doesn't have just one word with like a great like brand, but like that is like your tried and true brother. So like you can't forget to stick sometimes to the basics, and what's old is new again. I feel like we talked about that at the past couple of PDMIs, but it's so true. Like even in terms of media tactics, like direct mail is huge, and now you're tapping into influencers who may be your face of direct mail. So in terms of your brand and then your media strategy, like forgetting the basics, truly, and kind of using common sense, right? Like this is such a historical brand, and you can't just spill this on your customers that it's doing a rebrand without the explanation.
So Ryan, what do you tell clients? How do you reduce churn?
Reduce churn?
Yeah.
Again, I think it just goes back to understanding your customer, understanding who the most valuable customers are within your business, because then you're able to communicate with them and figure out what they really like about the product or service that you're offering. And then if you're able to tap into those key customers and get their feedback on the product or service that you're selling, I think you're building more trust with those customers over a longer period of time. So they're more likely to stick with your program and be champions of your offer or be champions of your brand, right? They're going to be the ones out there speaking organically on your company. And really, and in a world of digital marketing with TikTok, the rise of TikTok and influencers, a lot of these people really want to find brands that speak to their identity. So if you're able to kind of match and pair your service or product with those customers and finding out who those customers are, you can reduce your churn quite substantially. But then on top of that, it goes back to your Chick-fil-A example, right? Doing something, providing these customers with something that like unexpected that they're going to be excited about.
It's the wow factor.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So whether it's a free hat, or in my case, I work with a lot of oral care companies, offering them a free whitening kit, or get their reviews and see just providing that value goes such a long way to keep a longer lifetime value out of your customers.
So Sarah, you work for a creative company and a media company. So sometimes you have to see creative that you go, oh my God, we're never going to be able to buy media here. They're being too transparent. How often does it happen? Which do you prefer? Talk a little about that.
And you mean too transparent with like the offer?
Meaning transparent, that the offer of like stating point blank, you're going to be in a continuity, you're going to get hit on your charge card every 30 days. And it's like, but those are truer people. The more you're transparent, the more you're touching them, the more you're educating them, the truer you are, they're going to stay in for a more robust ROI. It's not going to happen immediately, but it's the build.
So the creative needs to be easy enough for the consumer to say yes. Okay, the more I have to sit there and think about how does it work, when am I going to get billed, how much really is this, the more questions are going through a consumer's mind, and the less likely they're just going to be responsive. I want them to respond. So when we look at this, we look at, well, a couple things, because some of your creative's going to have pricing, some of it's not in it. That the barrier to enter for the consumer to get started needs, if you're trying to reduce churn, needs to be high enough that we're balancing value and the price. It's too low, you're going to get a lot of churn with it. So from a creative standpoint, as we take a look at what are we telling the consumers, I wanted to say, yes, here's a good example. At one point in time, I had several different...
What is going on outside?
We're going to be floating away soon.
That's an exclamation point on it.
Yeah.
Wow. I had this client who had a diet product, and they really wanted to explain exactly how it worked and how you would put this on your food and everything it would do in your body. And it was so explanatory that the customer didn't respond. They sat there and they thought, gosh, what's that going to taste like? What's that going to do to my food? Am I going to look awkward in a situation? And we saw a really, really poor response on this. Whereas we took a different approach to it, and I didn't create the first creative of how are you going to feel? What is the impact of this? Like, what's your life going to be like? And made it easy to say yes, and immediately was responsive. Same thing happens if we're talking about a continuity type of offer. Yes, I can get in and try this. I can get in and you can make this easy and I'm going to feel all the benefits and this is going to make my life wonderful, and you can go into all of those types of messaging without having to go through so much fine print. You don't want to get in trouble, so fine print, refer them over to Linda, talk to Linda about what that fine print
We're
should
going to
look
talk
like.
about compliance very soon.
I just want to make sure that they say yes, and that it doesn't create a negative situation when they get on the phone with the call center or when they're on the website, that it's clear. Now, I've had customers ask some pretty interesting questions, though, because as we think about profitability, you need great response, you need great conversion, and you want a really high AOV and ultimately lifetime value on this. And so I've had some customers come to me and say, well, I really want to do forced continuity in this. I want to make sure that, yes, I can offer the product for $30 or whatnot, but I need to make sure that they buy it every single month, and they can only get that deal if they do it every single month. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Number one, I'm not your lawyer, so I'm not going to tell you if you can do it.
But our lawyer's going to talk about that in a few minutes.
And so I think that the idea of how do you work with them to get a price point out there that's digestible, great. And if you want me to wait on question that to Linda,
Yes, let's wait a second. So I'm going to jump in.
I think that's valuable.
Yeah. So Linda, Linda's going to speak a lot now because we're going to talk about compliance and everything that's happening in today's 2025 world. So how are compliance and transparency being handled today?
So I think it's very much what's been said here, which is make sure the consumer knows as early as possible if what's happening is they're signing up for a subscription or a membership, and if you're advertising price, I mean, to Sarah's point, you don't have to have the price at the first touch point, but if you do, then if the prices are going to increase and you know that, and you're particularly if you're offering a trial, you're going to need to kind of disclose that up front. Unfortunately, I think the FTC's new click-to-cancel rule it's incredibly draconian and incredibly prescriptive about how you have to make the disclosures. And right now we have no way around that. So if you kind of follow that rule, you're going to achieve the transparency, but I think it's very important to think about the rule in the context of particularly developing the customer buy flow. So obviously you want to make the disclosures, don't quote me on this to any government official, but you want to make the disclosures
Off the record.
as few times as possible. And there are ways to do that depending on where you put them. And so that's where I think sort of the creative and the transparency and the compliance come into play, that think about it as you're developing the creative, and particularly as you're developing the buy flow, and where are you going to have the customer essentially say yes. And I'll just give you an example of this. So for example, if you haven't made any disclosures yet, and then you have a button, and the button says, yes, or I want to order, or whatever it is, even if you're not, obviously you don't have any of their information, so you can't really charge them, the FTC will say, you know what? That was the moment that the consumer essentially accepted the offer. So if you said on that button, continue, or I want to learn more, or something else that isn't equivalent of a yes, I want this, then you don't have to worry that you didn't make the disclosures yet. And so that's just one example of where the more you mesh the compliance with the creative, I think ultimately the results are going to be better.
And what do you think businesses should be doing right now to ensure compliance within the rule?
So when Trump won the election, there was a lot of thought that they were going to repeal the rule. That doesn't appear to be the case now. The rule is being challenged in court, and they filed a brief supporting the rule, basically saying that, the rule is necessary, it's good for consumers, yada, yada, yada. But they did say to the court, maybe some provisions went a little far, and if you think they did, take those out and don't kill the whole rule. My personal prediction is if the court does that, I think they may soften a little bit on the cancellation, and it's not a prohibition, but it's a restriction on save a sale, and I'm sure you're going to talk about retention. And there is this broad provision that says if you have an ad and it has some sort of continuity or other negative option feature, if anything in that ad is misleading, then you can be challenged under the rule, and the consequences of that are civil penalties of $53,000 per violation. So what it's done is it's put, you had the same ad, one was a single order, and the other was for continuity. They could challenge the ad with the continuity more severely than they could the ad without it. And that's been a very controversial provision, and hopefully maybe the court will strike that one. But I think, unfortunately, the rule is here to stay.
Let's talk a little about forced continuity. I'm not sure that everyone in the audience knows what that is, so I'd love for you to give a little descriptive example of what it is. And then, obviously, can you force a consumer?
So forced continuity is going to be when to purchase the product, you have to purchase it knowing that you will be billed again, not as in a split payment, but you will get the product again. Very common in anything that is a consumable. So whether that's a beauty product, an ingestible, that sort of thing, it's not just buying a 1-month supply, it would be purchasing the 1-month supply and you're going to get it again 30 days or whatever the interval is. But that you are forced, that is the option.
And Racine, can you move to the next slide, please? How should brands think about attribution and optimization when success isn't immediate, but
I'm just
retention
reading the
is
question
key?
here because sometimes you go so fast. I have to
Sorry.
remind myself. I love it though. I love the energy. I mean, it's really important that, I think it's what we've all been saying, and it kind of sounds like a broken record, but while you're building the trust, you need to make sure that obviously they're converting in the end. So what's that kind of last touch point? And just in terms of the creative, if a customer, same with your media buy, if a customer feels like they're going to be tricked, they're not going to stick around. Yeah. So if they don't feel like that brand belongs on the media they're consuming, maybe, you're promoting, I don't know, some brand on TikTok just to spend on TikTok, but you're not really into the audience. You really need to understand that in your media strategy, but also your messaging. And I think optimization is key, is testing, seeing what's working, what's not working, and pivoting that way. If you saw, for example, for Care, we're really trying to extend our reach, and we're going through a bit of a rebrand in June, which we're really excited for. New logo, new mission, really focusing on, we have the awareness, but consideration. So people aren't going to just transact when they see our spot immediately. We have to build that trust. We have a lot of different services. And again, you're inviting a stranger into your house to take care of your most prized possession, your pet, your home to housekeep, your child. So how do you build that trust with them? And where else can we test, what other channels? So we did some small testing in January on sports programming, national, local news here and there to really see for our new rebrand where we can amplify to get that reach that we need, but also where we're going to see that conversion. So optimization's key in terms of your media strategy, for your brand health metrics, and then for your creative as well.
Love it. So Ryan, how do you balance strong acquisition offers with long-term retention and continuity? I know you're doing e-commerce, but I have clients who do e-commerce, but they still will then do literally callbacks, even though they haven't been called because they've acquired their number, they've done matchbacks. Yeah. So how do you guys work and do this?
Yeah, I mean, this is not tough, but I think it also comes, it all comes back to the customer and understanding what they want and what they're looking for. And getting that initial customer in the door is probably the hardest challenge. Keeping them on the subscription is tough too.
Right.
But I think that and I wanted to, this goes back to the last point we were just discussing too, is where brands kind of get in trouble with their subscription offering, especially when it comes down to forced subscriptions, is the customer feels like they're locked in or they're trapped or they're tricked. And then they want a way to talk to somebody at the company on why this is. And then companies not providing the resources or the, an agent to speak to or an email that's gonna help answer their question. Because, believe it or not, just a simple phone call talking to somebody at the company, explaining what the subscription is, can keep them on the subscription. And I find
customer care. It's
yeah, it's that customer care. Or just there's some good technologies out there that make it super easy if a customer comes in and wants to cancel, you can find out what the reason is for the cancel. Oh, maybe they thought they were tricked. You can put that. I didn't know about it, or it's too expensive. And then you can provide solutions down the road. So if they say it's too expensive, you're like, okay, well, they're willing to be on the subscription, but $99 a month is too much. What if we drop it to $49.99? Is that good for you? Is that valuable for you? And that's where you can build the trust and keep that customer for a longer period. And then now they have a good experience. Now it's not I had to call a call center, dial 5, 6, 7, and then still not get my subscription canceled. So
Absolutely. So Sarah, what KPIs matter most when scaling continuity campaigns on TV? Those evolve over time.
Initially, you're going to be looking at day one numbers. So that's going to be your response, your CPO, your day one MER, but that really is just day one. Ultimately, we do need to look at lifetime value. And that lifetime value, it's sometimes hard to know what those day one metrics are going to turn into from a lifetime value standpoint. So having done some pro forma work on it, you'll have backed into some short-term goals to identify as some benchmarks to benchmark against as you get there, but ultimately measure what that is. And then, as we kind of talked about before, making sure you're set up for success to measure it back to what that looks
Attribution.
like. Sometimes we have found, and I love what you're saying about the customer care and getting that information. Mm-hmm. You can find some customer segmentation information in here. And you can get some of that also, even if you're having those conversations, getting some information when they purchase, like why they purchase, what are the objections to purchase, and allows you to do some segmentation with both your creative as well as your media. And with that, you can find that you can end up with some pieces of your marketing and your media that need to have lower front-end acquisition goals because the lifetime value isn't as strong. Same can go the other way, is that you can have different goals because you do have such a really great I think I said those backwards. A lower front-end acquisition goal because you have such a strong lifetime value. And then higher front-end acquisition goals if it is a medium channel that has a lot of churn to it.
So let's talk a little about what strategy was used for chargebacks. How do you prevent them, Racine?
Me?
No, I'm going to do Racine. You're the lawyer.
That's what I thought.
Not
That's
the
not my
marketer.
question.
How do we prevent chargebacks?
Yeah. And what do you do to reduce them?
I'm only 6 months into care, so I can't really speak about what we do on our end, but I think like the customer service is really important. For example, we're launching an influencer program, and just to your point, working with lawyers is key to this because influencers can go off script. You want them to relate to their followers. The legals, like you have to include this term, you have to include that, and then at that point, it's like it doesn't feel like very organic. So that I'm a little nervous about that program just because we are offering a promo code, the highest promo code we've ever offered for this, for us to get some engagement. And there may be some belief that the influencer had a better experience than who they're talking to. So there may be a chargeback issue, but in terms of how we're preventing that, it's really sticking to the legal guidelines and making sure all of our talking points are kind of like looked through and validated through every single comb piece of hair in the comb to make sure that we're, hitting all of those.
And it's key.
Yeah.
It's compliance. I do
Yeah.
the Medicare Advantage, and the CMS now runs everything. So we
Yeah.
can't influencers. We did a test, but they can't be organic.
Right.
They're
like,
reading
our
from script.
legal wanted us to put on like the influencer story that this is just for the ad, and I had to fight back, obviously. Like, no, we're gonna get no conversion from that. Like, and like it's not building that like trustworthy. So obviously influencers have influential marketing has their own set of FTC guidelines that we're following, but I think it's hard for brands and the legal team who's just looking at the words on a page to understand how it comes to life. And like, it's actually really helpful to get the legal team, our legal team and the agency's legal team, or even like the influencer's manager on a phone to just like really talk about it, because it's constantly changing. So that's definitely one way we want to prevent anything from happening.
And I think one of the things we have to remember is that different genres react differently in subscription-based model. You have vitamin continuity, you have healthcare, you have beauty, you have insurance. So it's all different, and the way you touch the consumer is different. And again, we're going to keep saying you keep touching and touching. It's the most important thing you can do. So
Fern, one more thing on chargebacks.
Yeah.
Because I think about chargebacks a little bit different than churn.
Yeah.
So with the chargeback, you have a situation where someone's gotten their credit card statement, and in this case, instead of calling the company, they're talking to their credit card company and saying they're disputing the charge. And that's really bad. That's going to impact your merchant processing, and you can only have such a percentage of your merchant processing that gets handled that way before it becomes really ugly.
Like less than 1% in most cases.
It's very low.
Yeah.
So a couple of strategies on this is, number one, at the point of purchase, if the credit card charge is not going to come through as your product or your company name, to make it really clear at that point of purchase what they're going to see on their statement as the company that's been doing the billing. Secondly would be have the charge come across as the product or the company name. Right. Okay, I know that's not always the case, but please try to make that the case.
It's so important. I totally agree.
Secondly, or thirdly now, put the phone number in there. If they're looking at their credit card statement and they're frustrated for some reason, it's a 30-day supply, they don't need it anymore, they haven't had a chance to use it, I don't want them calling the credit card company. Have them call. Have great customer care that can say, we can move it to 60 days, 90 days.
That's
You're not happy with the whatever the charge is, throw the bonus items, retain the customer. Don't have them call the credit card company.
That's one of the first things I get, like when I review my clients, I look at their descriptors on their card, what descriptors they're using. Sometimes it's very long URLs, or it's a different company. It's like the umbrella company to the brand company. So customers don't understand what the charge is. So it's exactly, that can save a lot of chargebacks. And when you put the number there and they can call it and they're calling you instead of the credit card, that makes a lot of sense.
I would just say as like a consumer or a very avid, I'm from New York City, I don't take the subway, I love Lyfts and Ubers, but the experience of when I have a problem on my Lyft or Uber or cancellation fee, I'm like the top priority for both on Lyft is very different than Uber. Uber responds, they have a great bot, they usually refund me if there's an issue, not like this is happening a lot. Lyft just sends you kind of to the abyss. And it's kind of shocking, like for me, I don't know, maybe there's another way, but Uber has the chat function right there. And it's kind of shocking because that makes me want to use Uber more than Lyft, because if there's an issue, they're going to get back to
customer
me.
care. It's all about the experience. It's about educating and experience.
Yes.
Those are absolutely key.
I just want to add, I love that you said this and made the point, because one of the themes, obviously, of the new FTC rule, click to cancel, is you got to make cancellation easy. Now, it's mostly focused at the point of transaction, but we've seen situations where the FTC has looked at how does the charge appear on the customer's credit card, and if it's not the same brand name or a brand name that they're familiar with, and there's no 800 number, that conversation isn't going to go well. They're going to really view that as making it difficult for the consumer to cancel, because why didn't you give them any information, on that bill? So in addition to 100% like the best thing you can do to reduce chargebacks, it's going to help from a regulatory standpoint.
And remember, the consumer's smart. Okay, they're educated, so they really know what's happening, and they're looking for the scam. So make it, a positive for them.
Yeah, now with like social media outlets like Reddit, like they may be looking for the scam before they even start to transact with your product. Like I was going on a trip, and I was like, let me just like look at the hotel on Reddit, and I was like, oh God, I'm putting this away because it's already booked, and I had a really great experience, but some of the reviews were right, and I had those experiences. So there's just such an outlet now with Reddit and TikTok, and anyone really just Instagram shares their opinions, Google reviews so openly that you really want to make sure that you're getting that before they have a negative view of your brand.
But what do you do for older market? Okay, everything
Right.
you just said is younger market. How does the older market prevent being scammed? How do we educate them so that they know they're signing
They're smart
up?
cookies. They're with it.
They're smart
They
cookies,
know
they're
what's
with it. I love it. So, Linda, when we're finishing up here, what's one piece of advice you'd give to marketers looking to improve continuity in their strategies?
So I would say if you haven't reviewed your acquisition and cancellation flows since the FTC rule was announced and it's going into effect on May 14th, I would do an audit of that entire process to make sure you're compliant, because they're going to be looking for targets. Every time they pass a rule, they look for targets. And I'll add to that, it's not point 2, it's an extension of point 1, okay? Is really, really focus on your cancellation and retention efforts, because that's really where a lot of the action is happening. And for example, California now requires, if you're doing any retention efforts online, you have to keep the cancellation button up simultaneously with any offer you're presenting. A lot of states. So,
Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo what Linda's saying there. It really just comes down to the disclosure that you're providing the customer, and just providing that extra customer care, providing touch points so that they can click to cancel easily as they got in the subscription, make it as easy to get out of it. And I think, a lot of brands that, have made a lot of money on subscription are kind of scared of these new rules. But I would say, like anything in marketing, you just have to embrace it and adapt and, move on with the times, because I think the more information is at our fingertips, and I think the more transparent you eventually are with your customer, the better they're going to trust you and the longer they're going to stay on. So, traditionally, if you're hiding your subscription or you're making it hard for them to cancel, you're dealing with high chargebacks, you're dealing with high refunds, and it's all about new acquisition at that point to keep up, to try to reduce your churn. But if you can just be upfront and provide the value, provide the customer care, you don't really have those issues as much.
So we started with transparency is key.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. Racine, anything to add?
Yeah, transparency, clear value propositions, and a seamless onboarding. Like giving them, I know not like that
free
white
Chick-fil-A hat.
That white glove. I love a freebie. I love a freebie. Honestly, it makes me happy. I have too many, but in my little studio apartment in New York. But I love it. And then a seamless onboarding, like just like a welcome email with very clear steps, and a little personalization is very helpful, I think, as well. Yeah.
Sarah, anything from you before we throw the audience questions?
I think we said a lot of things today that can be a little bit kind of scary and make people feel a little bit scared of getting into this. And yet my point is, if you don't have continuity of some sort in your program or your client's program, find a way to add it in.
Yeah.
It's actually a really great source of revenue, whether that is...
Predictable revenue, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whether that is a cleaning product to clean the product that they have, whether that is an extra warranty type of piece of it, it is great. It's a great way to keep up that relationship with your customer. You paid so much to get that customer. Find a way to maintain that relationship with them and create a piece of continuity with that customer to keep going.
Absolutely. So let's throw the audience questions. You have 5 people who know continuity.
Hi, Michael Weinstein with Jam Direct. This was great, by the way, super informative. I took a ton of notes. So just again, focusing on the whole reducing churn, increasing retention, I'll give an example of something that's worked for one of the companies I'm working with, and then I just want to get your thoughts on any other strategies you might have. So we have a supplement brand. About 35% of the people are taking the subscribe and save. It's not forced, it's very blatant, it's not even defaulted to. And so the customers are happy, no chargeback issues or anything like that. The biggest issue we faced was that a number of the people were taking the subscribe and save and then canceling before the next shipment in order to get the discount. So what we did was we reduced the discount. So instead of 20% off, we dropped it down to only 10% off. But we gave them, we let them know that the longer they stay in, they get a larger discount every single month, and it keeps going up until we were comfortable, and that's been game-changing for us. So I wanted to just ask if you guys have any other nuggets like that or some suggestions, like you mentioned the hat and the merchandising or some loyalty points. What else do you think customers are looking for that's going to help them stay longer? Again, on the up and up, not looking to do anything that would surprise them.
So in the vitamin continuity business, and I've come from that business, we've done a lot of refer a friend or doing literally 3 months at a time and give them a deeper discount, and they stay in longer rather than getting it monthly. So we did that with Focus Factor. We blew the doors off. So it's worth testing. You test, and test.
I have an example on that, Michael. So first of all, I love everything that you've tested on that. What this client did is they essentially did bucks of their sort. So what we talked about in the beginning here was really about making sure that the barrier to enter is not so low that we have high churn, right? And so we can't have the product be too cheap, and we've got to match that value with the price. But at the same time, as we think about keeping them in that funnel and maintaining that, we have to make sure that the switching cost is too high for them to walk away from it. So what else do they get? What is the value of staying with you? And so is it that for every month that they stay, they get these things? People throw out all sorts of birthday incentives and stuff like that, but it's those dollars that they can't convert to something else, but can use to redeem for a product that builds. And as that builds, it becomes so challenging to switch to any other product when they're essentially going to get a whole 3 month supply from yours or whatnot.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, let me just say one more thing on that. It also gives you a great way to keep talking to them.
Right, it's touching.
Okay? Yep, that, hey, you now have this, congratulations, like $2 more and you'll get this here, right? It's a great conversation piece.
Love it. Goes back to your son while he wants to put everything Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, that's right.
I'd just like to comment on that. Life Extension, they're a supplement company, does exactly that. They give you bonus points every time, and you can only use them when you order online from them.
Yep.
And also Walgreens, of all things, they give you points when you put your telephone number in.
Yep.
And it really matters.
Incentivizes.
It does.
Absolutely, I agree.
Of a coupon.
I wonder on that if it makes a difference on the demographic.
Yeah.
Okay? Meaning that our younger generation doesn't mean as much as to an older, more saving generation. That might be a whole nother subject.
I still use rain checks, so I don't know. I'm old school, but yeah, I agree with that. I feel like they don't care. I'm like, they don't want to put their number in. I'll pay the $2 extra. I'm like, you're gonna pay for shipping? Like, get that kills my soul. But that is very true of the younger generation. They don't really think about the financial implications of their purchase. Where I'm looking at everything.
Right.
I don't know if that's just like a personality shift, a culture thing, but that I've definitely seen that from like my cousin to me, just like first party. It's like it's a different experience, and she's a couple of years younger than me. Good point.
Hi, thanks. Chris Foster from Modern Postcard. Question for you guys: have you done continuity programs in the B2B space? Do you have experience in that? And if so, I'd be curious. And if not, then does anyone in the room have experience in B2B continuity?
From a service standpoint, yes. And so what the continuity on that is often a comeback to service the product. Okay, so if your standard warranty is, let's say, a 1 year, okay, purchase to get a 5-year warranty, let us come pay, $199 a year. We'll come by, we'll change all the filters, we'll do this type of a maintenance check on it. You'll get this 5-star. This is great. You can tell your customers, you can put it on your website. It's good resale, like all those types of pieces to it, but it is a service that they won't have to outsource to someone else and make it an easy fraction of what the original price was.
Any other questions?
Was that helpful?
It's picking our brains.
A bit. So what I'm trying to think of are different and unique ways of adding either different services or different consultation or some type of specific service that keeps them there for some fee, that for like a quarterly or yearly fee or monthly fee, to get them something that they wouldn't get otherwise.
What's your industry? Is this for your company?
Yeah, it's for our company. So Modern Postcard does automated and targeted direct marketing and direct mail.
Okay.
And so we thought of different creative services and different, maybe data services. So I didn't know if you guys had the experience in the B2B space with those continuity ideas.
I have an idea for you that I'll share with you specifically offline. Okay? But it comes down to added value.
Right.
Okay? So we're all consumers, right? Whether we're representing ourselves or our company. So it's that added value of what's unique about our relationship versus the relationship somewhere else. How does that add value to me and my business?
Perfect.
Got time for a couple more if anyone wants one. Has one?
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone,
Great.
for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Great job, you guys.
Thank you.